October 14th, 1806. It is early, very early. We had been moving almost non-stop since yesterday, some of our boots still damp from crossing the river. The enemy is believed to be further south at Jena. We in the 3rd Corps had been instructed to lead a flank. That was all that us in the ranks knew. That and the rumours we have all heard about the mighty Prussian Army. If those rumours were still true, and their reputation still withstood, then no sane man would want to face them in battle. The one thing some of us had to help us through was that under our Emperor, we had never lost a battle. I did not know what time it was, but there was little light as we marched towards a place called Hassenhausen. Some of us near the front could hear the sounds of the horses of our cavalry galloping ahead of us. The fog and the night together made visibility difficult. We knew that the enemy were close, but we did not know how many. That is the biggest fear, the unknown. Dawn passed, but the fog remained. We could now see the village of Hassenhausen was where our division was headed. This side of the river was hilly and uneven. I'm grateful for the limited light we do have. Once we arrived at the village, the cavalry rode ahead, once more as our lines formed with a steady caution. The unnerving silence was broken suddenly by the distant sounds of gunfire, muskets. We still could not see what our cavalry had found. I did not question the order to form square, forming into my position at an angle where I cannot see our front. I can only hear the sounds of horses and riders turned into echoes by the fog. My hands were shaking, so I tightened the grip on my musket to stop them. I could hear the soldier next to me muttering a prayer to himself. The cavalry fled back. None of us knew how many had originally gone, but we could see that they had been routed. Riding beyond our position, our commander told us to make ready. The front-facing soldiers firing a volley, the air quickly filled with the sounds of muskets, riders being thrown and yelling, horses panicking. They didn't have enough time to do much damage, causing them to flee. Looking around, some of the other infantry being moved by officers, we were now occupying the village. Finally the mist cleared, but I wish it hadn't. Countless cavalrymen now were charging us, men dressed in black and blue uniforms yelling as they met us. I kept my eyes looking around as I reloaded my musket, sounds of our cannon deafening many. I took my shot at a distant rider, seeing his rider horse disappear into the chaos. Several of us were unfortunate to meet their ends by lucky Prussian swings of sabres. None of us could help the relief that came over us, at the sight of those deadly horsemen withdrawing. Remaining in our squares, many of us adjusted to fill in the gaps that had been opened by the cavalry. None of us thought that was it. We remained in our squares, no orders telling us otherwise. And then they came again, those horsemen, and we could hear in the distance the sounds of drums. Their infantry were also approaching. The cavalry battered us again and again. We kept our ground, bringing down more of them. In the meantime, I heard mention of Prussian flags being seen in the distance, heading straight towards us. No attack hit us. No other cavalry charges. Neither side attacked the other. I welcomed the break. Most of us did. We received welcome support on the right of the village. and soon after the Prussians struck once more, striking us across our line, but we could see from the village that the right flank was being hit the hardest. I did not know what was happening on our left. We were told to hold Hassenhausen, so that's what we continued to do. Fending off repeated attacks, losing more of our own each time. Each attack made our own stance more desperate, some of us having to turn to the bayonet they got so close. Those of us who were still fighting suddenly found ourselves supported by more men in our great blue uniforms. These men were from Moran's division that had arrived upon our left flank. Together we fought off the last of the Prussian attacks on the village. Another gap in the chaos fell upon us in the centre, the action isolating itself to the flanks. Most of us in the centre were either wounded or tired. The bodies of our fallen moved away from the front line. We quickly started seeing flags of our own advancing on our left flank into the valley below. Picking up our weapons, I knew our rest was over. Forming into our ranks once more, ready to advance at the order. No Prussian support arrived against us, so our marshal took the initiative. Darting my eyes around, I could see distant flags continuing to advance away from us. Our flanks were now the aggressors, and then our ears finally heard it. Advance. Our officer shouted, unburdened by the scratch on his cheek from an earlier passing bullet. Leaving the village, we had to step over many Prussian dead and wounded. Our drums shut out any eerie silence, meeting distant cannon and musket fire. We began this battle as the first onto the field, the first to be attacked by the enemy, but now we were the rear of the army, and it was a welcome place to be. The enemy being driven back before us, I doubt I would be alive to continue this if our division was switched with one of our flanks. Some of us were running low on ammunition now, but our task to hold the village was successful. The Prussians still had many reserves. We saw them remaining still, not advancing to meet us. Distant gunfire and our advances continued to drive the Prussians back, our artillery positioning itself on an overlooking hill, beginning to bombard the reserve lines. Our officers started receiving more instructions, and our push quickened across the plateau. Their lines breaking flags being seen from the distance, turning and heading away on the flanks, but in the centre, one final challenge lay ahead of us. Infantry forming in front of their fleeing allies, the Prussian blue and black uniforms blocking the way ahead of us. They were retreating. This was a hastened rearguard. A hasty defence against a weary centre. This will still be a challenge. Their volleys hit us as we advanced, as hitting back, the sound of our muskets blending with the blaring drums of our columns. The flanks of their defence began being enclosed by our flanks as we charged the centre. Our officer directing us to fire, yelling "Charge!" through the smoke, our muskets, running with our muskets ahead, bayonets still fixed, colliding with the stern lines of our enemy, but it was a losing battle for them now. I locked my weapon with an enemy musket, pushing forward to throw him to the ground, continuing to push through, some falling to shots into their back. We kept pushing against them, some dropping their muskets, hands in the air. The victory was certain. Our forces were held up the slopes, overlooking the retreating army. I was one of the many to move the prisoners away. The quiet sounds back towards Hassenhausen made me feel both shame and relief. Passing by abandoned cannons, we saw soldiers checking and helping some wounded. Passing over fallen soldiers and horses alike. The bodies of those who were in the same division as me. I broke off from the prisoner escort, finding the body of the soldier who had spoken the prayer. I rested a hand on him before leaving back to the prisoners. Our division were hit hardest, but our defense of Hassenhausen, our victory here today, would be remembered for years to come. Two weeks after the Battle of Jena-Auerstadt, Napoleon's army occupied Berlin, granting the French the upper hand as the War of the Fourth Coalition progressed. And that was a short story that I whipped up about the Battle of Auerstadt. It was the first Napoleonic short story that I have done, so for those of you over on YouTube, I hope you all enjoyed. Please do share with your friends, please do comment and like and subscribe. The actual music details will be in the description. And yes, until next time, welcome to the Kingdom of Athalas and the world of Philemon books, and please do give some suggestions of other potential battles that I could do short stories for, aiming at keeping them Napoleonic for now, but welcoming others in the future. Cheerio.